Prologue. Kartik. Have you ever seen a girl of greater purity, my prince? Those words were not meant for Kartik, but he'd heard them all the same. High Priest Hemant stood with his head bowed close to the young prince's ear. His voice was pitched low, but his words still carried, that could not be helped. The priest's voice was rich and unmistakable, a vast thing, neither loud nor soft, but pervasive. It was a voice made for mantras, for song, for guidance, for pouring faith like wine into the cup of a waiting heart. The two of them, priest and prince, were standing in the gardens of the imperial temple, birds trilling in the trees above them, and the wind swaying the branches. All of that noise was just loud enough to mask Kartik's presence, his small, surprised stutter of breath, and the motion of his broom scraping up a cloud of dust from the marble path. He stepped back into the shadows of the temple wall, his broom clutched tight in his hands. He hardly dared to breathe. The high priest spoke again, gentle, coaxing, his hands upon the young prince's shoulder. The words reached Kartik's ears like leaves falling onto steady water, a soft collapse followed by a ripple of motion that ran right through him. Will you protect her? Will you guide her so that she may keep her goodness? That was how priests often asked questions, Kartik had learned. Questions mildly phrased that demanded answers clawed from the marrow of a man's bones, the deepest blood of his heart. And sure enough, the young prince nodded slowly and said, "Yes, of course I will. What kind of brother would I be if I didn't save her from the tarnish?" Kartik waited for them to leave, finished his chores in a kind of numb, ecstatic haze. His hands were steady, but his vision was a blur of lights and color. He walked across the temple floor, seeing everything with new eyes. The sandstone of the walls, carved with flowers, gossamer curtains that filled every door and alcove, billowing in the wind. On every surface he saw the high priest's words echoed back at him, rewritten, remade, calling him. Have you ever seen a girl of greater purity? Kartik should not have heard those words, should not have carried them with him in the aftermath, inked indelibly into his own skull, as shining and constant as prayer song. But he had a mind made for knowledge, or so he had always been told. When he had been only a boy and a disciple in a lowly Sakitan temple to the faceless mother, his ability to recite hundreds of mantras and prayers from memory, and the Book of Mothers in its entirety, had drawn High Priest Himant's attention and led the High Priest to pluck Kartik from his old life. His mind had led him here, to the Harshringar and its jasmine-veiled palace, and the imperial temple where he now served. To the temple garden where a boy in training for his faith may stumble, unwitting, on the second prince walking alongside the high priest, speaking of the imperial princess herself, and feel a truth reverberate through him that he did not yet fully understand. She was here, at this very moment. In the temple, the young princess was kneeling before the statue of Divyanshi, all 5 mothers of flame, every single noblewoman who had willingly burned, giving her life to break the power of the Yaksa and bring an end to the age of flowers, were depicted in the prayer hall. 4 of them were arrayed in a crescent, their figures carved from gold. Ahamara, with her long hair loose around her, coiling like flame. Namvishi, a star of fire blooming from her forehead, her palms outspread. Suhana, with a broken bow in her hands and her face upraised, and Meenakshi, face lowered in prayer, hands clasped. Divyanshi stood at their center, her statue taller than the rest. Grandly wrought with silver flowers trailing her arms, she stared forward, proud and beautiful, her golden face serene. The princess kneeling at her feet was entirely in her shadow. The princess pushed a garland of flowers towards the statues of the mothers. The garland was deftly made, each blossom pierced through the heart with a pristine white thread that gathered close to the next. Jasmine, a mingling of yellow and white caught between weighty pink roses. He had seen those roses left as offerings so often that he recognized them as the ones the emperor's wife grew in her own private garden. Even in the vicinity of the temple, people gossiped, as if they did not know their voices wafted in through windows. A beauty, they called her. One day she'll break hearts. The emperor will want to watch her closely. But he didn't listen to gossip. He listened to truths and secrets, kept them, and learned from them. He listened now as she bowed her head and whispered to the mothers. She could not see him where he stood in the shadow, his broom still in hand, but he could see her, hear her, and know. It was then, when he was only a boy, that he began to see the shape of the future in a way even the high priest did not. And though the high priest's question had not been for him, in his heart he answered it. No, he had never seen a girl of greater purity, never in all his life.